The bank manager looked at me like I was a ghost. I was standing in Desert Bloom Bank in Tucson, Arizona, the same branch I'd used for 23 years. And Karen Whitfield, a woman who'd watched my grandkids grow up in Christmas card photos on my desk, was staring at me with her mouth slightly open. "Mr. Brennan," she said slowly, "I'm so sorry, but we can't process this withdrawal." I'd come in to transfer some money to my grandson Tommy's college fund. Nothing unusual, nothing complicated, just a grandfather doing what grandfathers do. "What's the problem, Karen?" She swallowed hard. "Sir, according to our system, you've been deceased since last Tuesday." I blinked. That's funny. I don't feel deceased. But Karen wasn't laughing. She turned her computer screen toward me, and there it was. An official Pima County death certificate with my name on it. Harold Raymond Brennan. Date of death, October 3rd. Cause, cardiac arrest. Certifying physician, Dr. Leonard Vance. I'd never heard that name in my life. "There's more," Karen whispered, and I could see her hands trembling. "The beneficiary on all your accounts has already been changed. Everything's been flagged for transfer to," she hesitated, "to a Crystal Brennan, my daughter-in-law. The woman who'd sat at my dinner table last Sunday, who'd kissed my cheek and called me Dad, who'd promised to help organize my financial documents because she was worried about me." I stood there in that bank for a long moment, feeling something cold settle into my chest. Not shock, not yet. Something older. Something I recognized from 32 years of investigating fraud for the IRS. Recognition. What I did next, how I took apart her entire scheme and watched her world collapse in front of everyone she'd ever fooled. I'll tell you everything. But first, you need to understand how a man like me ended up trusting a woman like her, and how close I came to losing everything I'd spent a lifetime building. Before I continue, I have a question for you. Have you ever been betrayed by someone who called you family? Someone who looked you in the eye and lied while planning to destroy you? If you have, drop a comment below. And if you believe that getting older should never make you an easy target, subscribe to John Vengeance. Because this story, it's for everyone who's ever been underestimated. I spent 32 years as a special agent with the IRS Criminal Investigation Division. Most people don't even know we exist. They think the IRS is just about taxes and audits. But my job was hunting criminals. Money launderers, tax evaders, fraud artists who thought they were smarter than the system. I put away doctors, lawyers, even a state senator once. I followed paper trails through shell companies and offshore accounts. I learned that the numbers never lie, even when everyone else does. I retired 6 years ago, at 65, right on schedule. My pension was solid. My house in Tucson was paid off. A nice ranch-style place in a quiet neighborhood. Nothing fancy, but ours. I'd earned it. My wife Eleanor, Ellie, had been with me for 44 years. She was a retired elementary school teacher, the kind of woman who remembered every student's name decades later. Warm, patient, and smarter about people than I ever was. Where I saw numbers, she saw faces. Where I saw patterns, she saw hearts. We had a good life. Our son Marcus had moved back to Tucson after his divorce 5 years ago, and when he started dating again, Ellie and I were happy for him. Marcus deserved someone good, someone who'd love him the way he deserved to be loved. When he brought Crystal home for the first time, I thought he'd found exactly that. She was 32 then, working as an ICU nurse at Banner University Medical Center. Smart, attentive. She asked about my old cases with genuine interest, laughed at my terrible jokes, and always offered to help Ellie in the kitchen. She remembered birthdays. She sent thank you cards. She visited us even when Marcus was busy with work. "She's a keeper," I told Ellie one night after Crystal had left. Ellie just nodded, but there was something in her expression I didn't understand then, a flicker of something she wouldn't name. If only I'd asked her what she was really thinking. What I learned later would have changed everything if I'd just been paying attention. They got married 2 years later in a small ceremony at a vineyard outside Sedona. Tommy, Marcus's 9-year-old from his first marriage, was the ring bearer. I gave a toast about second chances and new beginnings. Crystal cried. Happy tears, she said. I believed her. For the next 2 years, Crystal slowly became indispensable. She helped Marcus with his business. He owned a small landscaping company. She visited Ellie and me every week, sometimes twice. She organized our medications, helped file our taxes, even suggested we add her to our emergency contacts, just in case. "You're not getting any younger, Dad," she said with that sweet smile. "Let me help take care of you both." I was 70 years old. My knees hurt. My memory wasn't what it used to be. And here was this caring, competent young woman offering to lift some of the burden. I handed over our account information without a second thought. Now here's where I need to stop and tell you something important. Ellie saw it first. She never said anything directly, but she started keeping a journal. Every time Crystal asked about our finances, every time she steered conversations toward our will or our insurance policies, every time she found an excuse to be alone in my home office, Ellie wrote it down. Date, time, what was said. I didn't know about that journal until later, but Ellie knew. Somewhere in her teacher's heart, she knew that something was wrong with our daughter-in-law. She just loved Marcus too much to say it out loud. That day in the bank, the day I learned I was supposedly dead, I walked out of Karen Whitfield's office with copies of everything. The death certificate, the beneficiary change forms, the new account authorizations, all signed with what looked like my signature. But I'd spent 3 decades studying forged documents, and I knew in about 30 seconds that whoever had signed those papers had never seen me write my name. The loops were wrong, the pressure was inconsistent, amateur work. Crystal had underestimated me. I didn't go home right away. Instead, I drove to the Pima County Recorder's office and used my very alive presence to request an official copy of my own death certificate. The clerk looked confused but processed the request. The certifying physician was listed as Dr. Leonard Vance. I'd spent enough time with medical fraud cases to know how to find a doctor. Within an hour, I had his background pulled up on my laptop at a coffee shop near the county offices. And that's when the first piece of the puzzle clicked into place. Leonard Vance had been a licensed physician in Arizona until 3 years ago, when the medical board revoked his license for overprescribing opioids. He'd been facing criminal charges, but they were dropped due to a technicality. Now he lived in a trailer park on the south side of Tucson and, according to his social media, spent most of his time at the Desert Springs Casino. The same casino where, I would soon learn, my daughter-in-law had been gambling away her future. But I didn't know that yet, not then. What I did know was that Leonard Vance had no legal authority to certify anyone's death, which meant the death certificate was fraudulent, which meant someone had committed a felony. And I had a pretty good idea who. I called an old contact from my IRS days, Frank Morales, now a licensed private investigator with connections all over the state. I told him what I'd found. "Harry," he said, "this is elder fraud. This is federal. You sure you want to handle this yourself? I want to know everything before I make a move. Can you help me?" He could, and what he found over the next 2 weeks would make my blood run cold. But first, there was the matter of the forged power of attorney. I visited the attorney whose name appeared on the POA document, a man named Gerald Hutchins with an office downtown.
When I showed him the paperwork, his face went pale. "Mr. Brennan, I've never seen this document before in my life. I never drafted this. I never notarized this." He pointed to the notary stamp at the bottom. "Maria Santos. I don't recognize the name." I did some digging. Maria Santos had been a notary public in Maricopa County until she died 18 months ago.
Crystal had gotten her hands on blank, notarized documents from somewhere, probably a fraud ring, and filled in the details herself. This wasn't impulsive. This wasn't a desperate mistake. This had been planned for months. My daughter-in-law had been preparing to steal everything I owned while smiling at me across the dinner table. And then I met Rosa Delgado. I was sitting in that same coffee shop, going through bank statements Frank had obtained, when a young woman approached my table. Late 20s, tired eyes, the look of someone who works too hard for too little. "Excuse me," she said quietly, is your daughter-in-law named Crystal Morrison?" I set down my coffee. "Her maiden name, yes. How do you know that?" Rosa sat down across from me. And for the next 45 minutes, she told me everything. She was a cocktail waitress at Desert Springs Casino. She'd served Crystal dozens of times over the past 2 years, watched her win, watched her lose, watched her spiral deeper and deeper into debt. One night, Crystal got drunk after a particularly bad run, started bragging to another woman at the blackjack table about her retirement plan. She showed her pictures on her phone, Rosa said, an older man and woman. Said the old man had no idea what was coming. Called him a sweet, stupid fool. She pulled out her own phone, showed me a screenshot she'd taken that night. There was Crystal, leaning over the table, my photo clearly visible on her screen. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked. Rosa's eyes filled with tears. "Because my grandmother was robbed the same way. A woman who took care of her, gained her trust, stole everything. By the time I figured it out, my abuela was gone. The stress killed her." She wiped her face. "I never got justice for her. But maybe you still can." "I intend to." But I still didn't have the full picture. I didn't know what had made Crystal so desperate, so reckless. I didn't know what was driving her to risk everything on a scheme this dangerous. That answer came from the most unexpected place, and it would turn out to be the key that unlocked everything. 3 days later, Marcus called me. His voice was shaky. "Dad, Crystal's been acting strange, secretive. I found an old phone of hers in a drawer. She said she gave it to me as a backup, but there are messages on it, hundreds of them. Deleted, but, Dad, I think something's really wrong." I asked him to bring me the phone. And what our forensics expert recovered from that device, the text messages Crystal thought she'd destroyed forever, they contained her own written confession. Every detail of the plan laid out in black and white between Crystal and her cousin Dwayne Morrison. One message still haunts me. "The old man trusts me completely. By Christmas, we'll be in Mexico." I sat in my living room that night, Ellie beside me, the evidence spread across our kitchen table. Death certificate, forged POA, casino footage, text messages. Enough to bury her. But Crystal didn't know any of that yet. She still thought she was winning, still thought I was just a confused old man who couldn't see what was happening right under his nose. She had no idea that I'd already set the trap. And Thanksgiving dinner was 3 weeks away. Crystal must have sensed something was shifting. Predators always do. Within days of my visit to the bank, she launched her counterattack. And I have to give her credit. It was smart. Vicious, but smart. It started with phone calls. My niece Patricia in Phoenix called me concerned. "Uncle Harry, Crystal reached out to me. She's worried about you. She says you've been forgetting things, getting confused, making accusations." Then my old Army buddy Raymond, who I hadn't heard from in months.
"Harry, I got the strangest call. Your daughter-in-law says you're not doing well, says you accused her of stealing from you. That doesn't sound like you, buddy." One by one, Crystal was calling everyone in my life, planting seeds of doubt, building a narrative. The sweet, concerned daughter-in-law, heartbroken because her father-in-law was slipping into dementia. She cried on the phone to them, talked about how hard it was to watch, how she just wanted to help. I'm 71 years old. I've seen a lot in my life. But I'm telling you this because maybe someone watching knows exactly what I'm describing. That feeling when someone is slowly, systematically turning the people you love against you, making them doubt your sanity, making them wonder if maybe, just maybe, you're the problem. It's called gaslighting, and it's one of the most effective weapons an abuser can use against an elderly victim. But Crystal made one critical mistake. She underestimated Ellie. My wife had been watching Crystal for 2 years, writing everything down in a journal she kept hidden in her nightstand. Every suspicious question, every time Crystal asked about our accounts, every time she steered a conversation toward wills or insurance or what would happen when you're gone. When Marcus came to our house, sent by Crystal to check on me, Ellie was ready. "Son," she said, pulling out the journal, "your father isn't losing his mind. He's being targeted, and I have 2 years of evidence right here." She handed him the journal, page after page of dated entries in Ellie's careful handwriting, times, conversations, observations, a pattern so clear that even Marcus, who loved his wife, couldn't deny what he was seeing. He sat at our kitchen table for a long time, not speaking. When he finally looked up, his eyes were wet. "What do I do?" he whispered. "Nothing yet," I said. "We're not ready, but we will be."
Marcus left that night shaken, but not yet convinced. Torn between the woman he'd married and the parents who'd raised him, I understood. Love makes us blind to things we don't want to see. But Crystal wasn't done. When the gaslighting didn't work fast enough, she escalated. 3 days later, I received a certified letter from the Pima County Superior Court. Crystal had filed an emergency petition for temporary conservatorship. She was asking a judge to declare me mentally incompetent and give her legal control over all my assets. The petition included a letter from Dr. Leonard Vance, the same disgraced physician who'd signed my fraudulent death certificate, stating that he had evaluated me and found significant signs of cognitive decline consistent with early dementia. I had never met this man. He had never examined me, and he had no legal authority to evaluate anyone. But there it was, on official letterhead, being submitted to a court of law. I wish I could tell you I stayed calm, that the old IRS agent in me took over and I handled it like just another case. But the truth is, I sat in my living room and felt something I hadn't felt in decades. Fear. Not of losing my money, not even of losing my freedom, but of losing my family, of watching my son choose her over me, of spending my final years fighting in courtrooms while the woman who tried to rob me walked free. Ellie found me there, staring at the letter. She sat beside me and took my hand. "Harry," she said quietly, "you've put away criminals smarter than her. You've untangled frauds that would make this look like a child's game. And you've never, not once in 44 years, let anyone beat you when you knew you were right." She squeezed my fingers. "So what are you going to do?" I looked at my wife, at the woman who'd seen through Crystal before I had, who'd kept that journal when I was too trusting to see the truth. "I'm going to destroy her," I said, and I meant it. The competency hearing was scheduled for early December. That gave me 3 weeks to prepare. 3 weeks to gather every piece of evidence, line up every witness, and build a case so airtight that Crystal would never see it coming.
First, I needed to neutralize the incompetency claim. I scheduled an appointment at Banner University Medical Center with a board-certified neurologist, Dr. Amelia Chen, one of the top cognitive specialists in Arizona. I underwent a full battery of tests, memory assessments, psychological evaluations, brain scans, everything. The results came back exactly as I expected. No signs of dementia, no cognitive impairment, no decline of any kind. Dr. Chen's report was definitive. "Mr. Brennan," she said, "for a man your age, your mental function is exceptional. Whatever someone told the court, it's not supported by any legitimate medical evidence." I had her report notarized and added to my file.
Next, I subpoenaed Dr. Leonard Vance's medical records. Frank, my PI, had already confirmed that Vance's license was revoked. But the subpoena revealed more. Vance had been investigated twice for providing false medical documentation in exchange for payment. He was a fraud for hire. And when we confronted him with the evidence, Frank and I sitting across from him in his run-down trailer, the old doctor folded like wet cardboard. "She paid me $5,000, he admitted, his hands shaking. "Said she just needed a letter for a family matter. I didn't know it was going to court, I swear." "You certified a death certificate for a living man," I said. "You committed multiple felonies. You're looking at prison time unless you cooperate." He cooperated. By the end of the week, I had Vance's signed statement admitting that Crystal had paid him to falsify both the death certificate and the competency letter. I had recordings of our conversation. I had his bank records showing the $5,000 payment from an account linked to Crystal's name. But I wasn't finished. There was still the matter of Crystal's cousin, Dwayne, the one she'd been texting about the scheme. Frank tracked him down in Mesa, working at a used car lot. When we showed him printouts of the text messages, his face went white. "Those were supposed to be deleted," he said. "Nothing's ever really deleted," I replied. Dwayne wasn't as tough as he thought he was. Within an hour, he'd given us a full statement, explaining how Crystal had recruited him to help with the fraud. He'd been promised 20% of whatever they took from me. He was supposed to help her move the money once I was declared incompetent. "She said it would be easy," he muttered. "Said you were old and confused. Said no one would believe you." "How's that working out for her?" I asked. He didn't answer. I had the death certificate. I had the forged power of attorney. I had the casino footage. I had the text messages. I had testimony from Rosa, from Dr. Vance, from Dwayne himself. Now I just needed the right stage. And Thanksgiving dinner was 1 week away. If you're still here with me, hit that like button so more people can see this story. Because what happened next, what went down at that dinner table, is the moment I'd been waiting for since the day I walked into that bank and learned I was supposed to be dead. Here's how I turned everything around when they thought they had already won. I called Crystal 3 days before Thanksgiving. "We should talk," I said, keeping my voice tired, confused, exactly what she expected to hear. "I've been thinking about what you said, about the conservatorship. Maybe you're right. Maybe I do need help." The silence on the other end of the line was delicious. She was recalculating, trying to figure out if this was a trap or a victory.
"Oh, Dad," she finally said, her voice dripping with fake sympathy. "I'm so glad you're coming around. I know this has been hard. I just want what's best for you." "Come to Thanksgiving," I said. "Bring Marcus and Tommy. Let's put this family back together." She agreed immediately. Of course she did. In her mind, she'd already won. The confused old man was surrendering. By Christmas, she'd have control of everything. She had no idea who else would be at that table. The days leading up to Thanksgiving were a blur of preparation. Frank helped me coordinate with the Arizona Attorney General's Elder Abuse Unit. 2 investigators from their office would be waiting in a car down the street, ready to move when I gave the signal. 2 Tucson PD officers would be positioned at the back door. Rosa agreed to come, not as a guest, but as a witness. When Crystal saw her face, she'd know the game was over. And then there was Marcus. The night before Thanksgiving, my son came to see me alone. He'd spent the past week reading the evidence I'd gathered. The texts, the statements, the bank records, all of it. "I didn't want to believe it," he said. "I loved her, Dad. I thought she loved me." "She might have, in her own way," I said, "but she loves money more, and she was going to destroy all of us to get it." Marcus was quiet for a long time. "What do you need me to do?" he asked. "Tomorrow, when it all comes out, just stand by me. That's all." He nodded, and for the first time in weeks, I felt like I had my son back. Thanksgiving Day arrived, cold and clear. Ellie had outdone herself. Turkey, stuffing, 3 kinds of pie. The house smelled like every happy memory I'd ever had. The guests began arriving at 2 o'clock. My niece Patricia from Phoenix, my old friend Raymond, a few neighbors, and scattered among them the people Crystal didn't know. Rosa, sitting quietly in the corner. Frank, pretending to be an old colleague. A woman from the Attorney General's office, dressed like a family friend. Crystal walked in at 2:30, all smiles and warmth. She kissed my cheek, complimented Ellie on the decorations, and helped Tommy set the table. She was performing, the way she always had. The perfect daughter-in-law, the devoted caregiver. She had no idea she was walking into an ambush. We sat down to dinner at 4. Crystal was positioned directly across from me, Marcus beside her, Tommy next to his father. Ellie sat at my right hand, her eyes steady and calm. We said grace. We passed the turkey. Crystal chatted about how grateful she was to be part of such a wonderful family. And then, as the plates were being cleared for dessert, I stood up. "Before we have pie," I said, "I'd like to say a few words." Crystal smiled. Marcus stiffened. Ellie reached under the table and squeezed my hand.
44 years ago, I married the love of my life, I began. We built this family together, raised our son, watched our grandson grow. And I always believed that family meant loyalty, trust, protection. I turned to look directly at Crystal. I believed that when you joined this family, you shared those values. Her smile faltered, just slightly. "Dad, that's so sweet." "I'm not finished." The room went silent. 6 weeks ago, I continued, I walked into Desert Bloom Bank to make a simple transfer to my grandson's college fund, and I was told I was dead. Nervous laughter from a few guests who didn't understand. Crystal's face went pale. Someone had filed a fraudulent death certificate in my name, changed the beneficiaries on all my accounts, forged a power of attorney to take control of everything I own. I reached into my jacket and pulled out a folder. That someone was you, Crystal. She opened her mouth, but nothing came out. I slid the first document across the table, the death certificate. This is the fraudulent document filed with Pima County. The certifying physician is Leonard Vance, a disgraced doctor who lost his license 3 years ago. He's admitted in a signed statement that you paid him $5,000 to sign this. Her eyes darted to Marcus, looking for help. He wouldn't meet her gaze. I pulled out the next document, the forged POA. This power of attorney was never created by any legitimate attorney. The notary stamp belongs to a woman who died 18 months before this document was supposedly signed. You bought blank notarized forms from a fraud ring. "This is insane," Crystal said, her voice rising. "You're making this up. He's confused. Marcus, tell them he's confused."
I'm not confused, I said, and neither is anyone else at this table. I nodded to Rosa, who stood up from her seat in the corner. Crystal's face went white when she saw her. You know this woman, don't you, Crystal? She's served you drinks at Desert Springs Casino for 2 years. She was there the night you got drunk and showed photos of me to a stranger, called me a sweet, stupid fool, bragged about how you were going to take everything. Rosa stepped forward. I have screenshots, and I'm willing to testify. Crystal's mask was cracking now. That's not, you can't prove. I pulled out my phone. Then maybe these text messages will help. I read aloud from the screen. The old man trusts me completely. By Christmas, we'll be in Mexico. That's a message you sent to your cousin, Dwayne Morrison, the same Dwayne who's already given a full statement to investigators. Crystal stood up so fast her chair fell backward. You can't do this to me, she hissed. I'm your family. I'm Marcus's wife. You can't. You tried to have me declared dead, I said quietly. You tried to steal everything I've worked for. You tried to have me committed so you could rob me while I rotted in a facility somewhere. I stepped closer to her.
You're not my family. You never were. The back door opened. 2 uniformed officers walked in, followed by the investigator from the Attorney General's office. Crystal saw them, and something broke inside her. She screamed, actually screamed, and lunged toward me, fingers clawed, face twisted with rage. The officers intercepted her before she got close. They put her in handcuffs while she thrashed and cursed, while Tommy started crying, and Marcus stared at the floor, while my niece Patricia covered her mouth in shock. Crystal Brennan, the officer said, you're under arrest for elder financial abuse, identity fraud, forgery, and wire fraud. You have the right to remain silent. I didn't hear the rest of the Miranda rights. I was watching my grandson, his small face streaked with tears, trying to understand why his stepmother was being taken away in handcuffs. I walked over to Tommy and knelt down beside him. It's going to be okay, I said. I promise. We're going to get through this together. He threw his arms around my neck and held on tight. As they led Crystal to the patrol car, she turned back and looked at me with pure hatred. You ruined everything, she spat. I shook my head slowly. No, you ruined yourself. I just made sure everyone could see it. The trial took place 4 months later in a federal courtroom in Phoenix. Crystal's attorney tried everything, claimed the evidence was circumstantial, claimed I had manipulated witnesses, even tried to resurrect the dementia narrative one last time. But the jury saw through it. They saw the documents. They heard the recordings. They watched Rosa testify about what she'd witnessed at the casino. They listened to Dr. Vance admit under oath that Crystal had paid him to commit fraud. And they read those text messages, every damning word. The trial took less than 3 hours. Guilty on all counts: elder financial abuse, identity fraud, forgery, wire fraud, attempted unlawful conservatorship. When the verdict was read, Crystal sat completely still. No tears, no outburst, just that cold, empty stare I'd seen the night she was arrested. The mask was gone now, and what remained underneath was something hollow. The sentencing came 6 weeks later. The judge, a woman about my age, who'd clearly seen cases like this before, didn't mince words. Mrs. Brennan, she said, you targeted a vulnerable elderly couple. You exploited their trust, their love for their son, and their desire for family connection. You did this not out of desperation, but out of greed. And you showed no remorse. Not when you were caught, not during this trial, and not now. She paused. The court sentences you to 8 years in federal prison, with eligibility for parole after 5 years.
You are ordered to pay restitution in the amount of $285,000. Crystal didn't react, just stared straight ahead as the bailiffs led her away.
Dr. Leonard Vance received 2 years for his role in the fraud. Crystal's cousin Dwayne got 18 months and 3 years of supervised probation. The fraud ring that had sold Crystal the notarized documents was referred to federal authorities for further investigation. Justice, as they say, was served. But justice doesn't heal everything. Marcus filed for divorce the week after Crystal's arrest. It was finalized before the trial began. He moved back in with us temporarily, sleeping in his old childhood bedroom while he tried to rebuild his life. Some nights, I'd find him sitting on the back porch, staring at nothing. "I keep wondering if any of it was real," he said once. "The way she laughed, the things she said. Was any of it true, or was I just a means to an end?" I didn't have an answer for him. Some questions don't have good answers. But I'll tell you this, my son is stronger than he knows. Within a year, he'd started a new landscaping company, bigger than the old one. He met someone new, a woman named Jennifer who teaches kindergarten and looks at him like he hung the moon. They're taking things slow. That's probably wise. Tommy is 10 now. He spends every other weekend with Ellie and me. We play chess, he's getting good, and I'm teaching him how to spot a lie. Not because I want him to be suspicious of everyone, but because I want him to trust the right people. There's a difference. I'm telling you all of this because I want you to understand something. Revenge isn't about anger. It's not about hurting someone who hurt you. Real revenge, the kind that matters, is about protecting yourself, protecting your family, and making sure the person who tried to destroy you can never do it to anyone else. That's what I did, and I'd do it again. After the trial, I started volunteering with the Pima County Elder Abuse Prevention Task Force. I give talks at senior centers, teach people how to recognize the warning signs, help them understand that being targeted doesn't mean you're stupid or weak. It means someone saw your goodness and tried to exploit it. That's not your fault. It's theirs. Ellie and I finally took that trip to Ireland we'd been planning for 20 years, walked the cliffs of Moher, drank Guinness in a pub in Galway, held hands like we were 25 again. Life goes on. It always does. I'm 72 years old now. I've built everything I have from nothing. I've loved, I've lost, I've been betrayed by someone I trusted completely, and I'm still here. If you're watching this and you're going through something similar, if someone in your life is making you feel crazy, making you doubt yourself, making you feel like maybe you're the problem, I want you to hear me. You're not the problem. Trust your instincts. Document everything. Find people who believe you. And never, ever let anyone convince you that you're too old to fight back. Because you're not. Was I right to expose Crystal the way I did? To invite her into my home for Thanksgiving dinner, knowing that she'd leave in handcuffs? Or would you have done something different in my place? Tell me in the comments. I really want to know. And if this story hit close to home, if you've ever been underestimated, if you've ever been betrayed, if you've ever had to fight for justice when everyone else told you to let it go, like this video, subscribe to John Vengeance, and tap that notification bell so you never miss when the tables turn and karma finally comes calling. Stay fierce, because every story deserves its moment of sweet revenge.